Welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Dr. Tricia Cardner and Elliot Rowe. So, Tricia, what do you have for us this week?
Well, Elliot, I know that we're going to be interviewing Tommy Angelo a little bit later, so I wanted to do something that was related to his topic. So I got a study from the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, and they looked at meditation. And what's really interesting about this particular study, it's done by a slew of people, and I'll have the link available on the page later, but it was a meta-analysis of 47 studies that have been done with meditation that did include a control group. They had to sift through about 19,000 studies to find the 47 that had a control group because they wanted to make sure, they were accounting for placebo effect. So this ended up being 3,500 participants, give or take a few, over the 47. And what they found was that people who meditate, guess what? It's as effective as antidepressants for people who are suffering from depression. And it also worked well to alleviate anxiety and pain. And because they had the control group, they could see the difference. Now, just to be very clear, the participants in the studies had at least 4 hours of instructions in a form of meditation. So it could have been mindfulness or mantra-based programs. There's different types. And that didn't seem to matter. But overall, they got 2.5 hours instruction over 8 weeks, just about. And the control group was also trained, but they were trained in progressive relaxation, which I know you're familiar with, Elliot, but no meditation. And then they figured out that by looking at all these, that meditation is basically an active training of the mind, which I know Tommy agrees with, and increases awareness and all this sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's very helpful with things like pain, anxiety, and depression.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I think there's just so much research coming up on how meditation works, the way that it changes the structure of the brain. And then obviously the hypnotherapy I do is a form of meditation. So I'm obviously very, very sold on the applications that it can have for poker. It's something where it can make such enormous differences to the way that people play. So as you said, we've got Tommy Angelo coming on the show today, and he's going to be talking to us about using mindfulness meditation and about basically his poker career since the 70s as a 14-year-old. So let's give him a call. So Tommy, thanks for coming on to the show. If you could just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Okay, thanks, Elliot and Tricia. Let's see, I started playing poker for money in 1972 when I was 14. And the next 15 years, I just played in home games with my buddies. And in 87 is when Sklansky and Malmuth came out with a Hold'em for advanced players, and I got a hold of that. And that's what began me thinking that I wanted to be a professional poker player. So 3 years later, in 1990, I left my career in the music business, became a full-time grinder, played it in home games in Columbus for 7 years, my hometown. Then I moved to California in 97. And played in the mid-stakes games out here. And then when the poker boom hit, I was already writing poker articles and had a little bit of a reputation on 2+2. So I was sort of at the front wave of when there was such a great need for instruction. And right away, I started putting together a program based more for serious players, serious amateurs, and professionals. And that's grown over the years. And now I'd say about 80% of my clients are either professional players or serious amateurs who are, intend to make money playing poker. I think one of the things that qualifies me to coach guys is that there's really no problem with poker or poker playing that I haven't been through when it comes to playing too much or, drugs and really just every possible pitfall that there is in the poker world. I've been through it at length. And so I feel like I'm able to connect with people pretty well because of that. And then it all turned around for me in 2003. I was really living a completely degenerate lifestyle up till then. And then I started meditating, eating better, sleeping better, and it's been all good since then.
I was going to actually ask you, what got you into meditation in the first place?
What happened was I developed a rather severe drinking problem around 2002, and then I got a DUI. And on that day, when they put the handcuffs on me, I knew I was done drinking for good, but I knew I was going to need some kind of assist. And having lived in California for 6 years at that time, I'd been exposed to yoga and meditation and all that, and I knew it was probably a really good thing for me. And so I just dove in head first. I just got a couple of yoga videos and started doing yoga at home. That led me to meditation. And so I've basically had a daily meditation practice since August 2003, the day I quit drinking.
Wow, that's amazing.
And from the meditation side, I know as a big part of your work is teaching poker players how to use meditation to help them with their mindsets and their games. How do you approach teaching the absolute beginner from a meditation point of view, how to really get the most out of it?
Well, what I do is I base it on where they are at that time and what their exposure to meditation is and what their attitude toward it is. So some guys are like, yeah, I've heard about it. I want to learn more. And other guys are like, well, can you just show me the parts that'll help me make more money? And so I've done everything in between. And that's usually where I start, which are what things can people do to bring more mindfulness awareness to their poker game while they're playing? And, call it meditation, call it mindfulness practice. Some of my clients go further than that, and they go deep into the spiritual teachings and all that. Other ones just simply use it as a way to make themselves a more efficient poker machine.
So what is, I guess, just a few easy ways that someone who's listening to this, who doesn't know anything about meditation or mindfulness, easy tips for them to just get started, or maybe a couple things they can try?
The simplest and most effective thing is sitting up straight while you're playing, whether it's online or live. And what that means is any awareness of your posture whatsoever is a moment of mindfulness. And so if you find yourself slouching and then you sit up straight, even if it's for 2 seconds, in my opinion, that's a moment of full awareness. That's exactly as aware as any monk has ever been. And then we get lax, we slack off. And our body becomes mindless and we don't know where our arms and hands are. And then all of a sudden we remember, oh, I'm going to consciously put my feet flat on the floor. I'm going to consciously raise my chest up. That, to me, is the most effective act that any poker player can ever do in any game.
And that is really simple. There's no excuse not to do that.
Well, there is a good excuse in the sense that we're all mindless all the time, pretty much. Right. And so the excuse is we're human. But yeah, it takes practice. Training. I like the word training. When I do my morning meditation, I think of it as training so that I can be more mindful. Well, actually, so that I'm more likely to be more mindful at any given moment during the day, whether it's playing poker or anything else.
So have you gotten to the point where you feel like you're mindful most of the time? And do you think that's a realistic goal?
When I'm playing poker, I have gotten to where I'm extremely mindful. I would say, mindful is a hard word to define, but I would say I am aware of my breathing or my posture about 75% of the time, which is a huge, huge number. I would say in the course of regular life, it's closer to 5% of the time. What I've done with poker is for 10 years now, I've actually made it a meditation practice. That's one of the reasons I go there, is with the objective of being mindful. And one of the things I've just discovered is one of my tools that I've been using the last 3 years is my object of the game now when I play is to observe every betting action on every street. I play live poker only, okay? Mm-hmm. And so this is after years of frustration of, two guys get to the end of the hand and I don't know what the betting was. And, I see the cards turn over. I'm like, oh my God, I need that information. And then I would get frustrated with myself because, and this is one of the things I tell my clients, is there aren't that many things you can control. We can control what we eat. We can control how we sleep. And with mindfulness, we can actually control what we think about. And that is, we call that focus. So my objective is to watch every bet of every street of every hand. I never am able to do that, but that is what I'm aiming for.
Excellent. And as you've started to do that, as you're more immersed in the game over these years, have you noticed a big difference to your win rate, your knowledge at the table, the way that you're playing? What sort of change has it brought? I've noticed,
my win rate has definitely gone up. My confidence level has gone way up, and my fear is just gone. That's the huge thing. I'm not afraid of all of the pitfalls that I used to have, such as playing too long, getting frustrated when 3 sets get cracked in a row. It wasn't just the act of tilting that was the problem. Or by tilt, I mean any non-A game. It wasn't just the act of deteriorating that was the problem. It was my fear of the deterioration that was hanging over me all the time. And that's just gone.
I find that very interesting that tilt, the way you see it, is any non-A game. What are some of the kinds of tilt that people bring to you? Like, what specifically are they telling you is their tilt? And I'm using air quotes, their tilt problem.
Well, playing too long, at a time or in a session is a form of tilt that, because it's lack of control, that then leads to actually, to betting strategy tilt, meaning playing less than you would, or playing not as well as you would if you were in your A game. There's so many kinds of tilt. There's getting annoyed at other people, getting personally involved with the other players. And this happens online or live. That's a form of tilt. Yeah. Boy, there's so many. Just any sort of, I like the word heedlessness. Once somebody reaches a point where they just don't care anymore, that they're furthering their own injury, whether it's eating too much, drinking too much, playing too many hands. That's more what I would call the traditional tilt, where there's real emotion involved.
Okay, and as you see people take up the meditation, did you witness that change? Perhaps over the 3 months, 6 months, as they start the meditation practice, what sort of change are you seeing in guys who really start taking this seriously?
Well, they write to me and tell me stories about instances in their life where they're shocked at how different their attitude is toward it. And one of the ones that comes up all the time is, for example, waiting in line and just being patient, say in traffic, or waiting in line at the grocery store, or anytime there's a dead space. And another one is, I've had clients tell me that, I just got off the phone with my mother and we just had the best conversation we ever had. And then they'll say the reason is because they're practicing what they've learned about compassion and able to see that, okay, my mother gets kind of insane sometimes, but we all do, and that's okay. So that type of attitude can go a long way in making noticeable changes in people's lives. And I do hear stories back like that all the time.
I'm going to ask you something that maybe is a hard question, maybe is undefinable, but where do you think the major source of tilt comes from for most people? I guess kind of the origin of tilt, if you will.
Well, there's a couple ways of answering that. One would be sort of the Western world that we live in answer, which is kind of on the surface. And then you have the deeper Buddhistic answer, which is, the first noble truth, what is the cause of suffering? Or the word suffering is used in Buddhism as a translation of an old word. It's kind of unfortunate. A closer translation, I think, is just dissatisfaction. We all carry this dissatisfaction around with us all the time, all humans, in that we want things to be different than they are, or we want things to stay the same. And neither of those things ever happens. Nothing is different than it actually is, and nothing stays the same. And so that's why all of us carry around this fundamental undercurrent of dissatisfaction. And so at the very deepest level, that's the cause of all tilt, all anger, all unhappiness, all envy. Pick any word that describes a negative feeling that humans have, and it all comes from this basic discord between reality as it is and reality as we wish it was.
That was very interesting. And in fact, I was looking over your book earlier and I was reading something and I even took a note on it, tilt as resisting reality, and put like a little question mark by that, because that's what I was kind of picking up from what you were saying. It's like when you're on tilt, you're actually resisting reality.
Right. So back to poker, you lose with a set, you lose with another set, and there's some sort of anger or upsetness or dissatisfaction at that moment. That is resisting reality. That's one way of putting words to it.
And with the mindfulness, this allows people to start to really see that, doesn't it? That it is something they can separate from themselves.
Right. What it does is, what mindfulness is, the definition that is generally used is that it's a conscious observation of what's going on right now, either sensory input or, and this is where it's really important, our thoughts themselves. So if someone takes time every day to sit quietly and practice training, observing their thoughts, which is not an easy thing to do, because the thought comes up, you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm now thinking about what an asshole my brother is. And then you have to go the next level and say, I'm going to just let that fall aside and go back to my breathing or go back to my posture. By doing that over and over and over, the idea is that when you're at the poker table and you lose with the set and your mind's going crazy, that you can rise up to a higher level of consciousness and look down on those thoughts and say, okay, right now, my mind is temporarily insane because it's resisting reality. The act of doing that observation in and of itself just pulls the rug right out of the pain, at least temporarily. It might only be half a second, but that act of observing over and over and over, hundreds and thousands of times, is the process of using mindfulness to reduce suffering.
You've been around the poker world for a very long time, as we discussed at the top of the interview. How have poker players received this information that you're putting out? Do most people take to it, easily, or is there some skepticism around it?
Well, of course, there's skepticism. I have had many questions and objections myself, and I find that my clients have many of the same ones. But I will say that I only talk about this stuff if I've been asked to. And so before I take on a client, I have a rather extensive screening process. And one of the things we discuss is, are they warm to hearing about this stuff? And if their answer is no way in hell, I think it's all voodoo, well, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But I'm less likely to take that person on as a client because before I take on a client, I have to be absolutely convinced that they're going to get good value. And I know that if somebody's interested in using mindfulness practices at all, that's an area that I can deliver value because I have so much experience with teaching beginners.
That you do. I mean, it's apparent. I'm kind of immersed in the mindfulness and meditation literature myself. And I can tell that you really have an extensive knowledge base. It's very impressive.
Well, it's just, I've been at it for a while, and I've been very fortunate to work with so many sharp guys. I just want to say something. I was listening to some of your guys' podcasts, and you're doing some great work. And I just listened to number 26. And Tricia, you mentioned at the beginning something that's a little relevant here, which was about the Mediterranean diet and its risk on the probability of depression. I thought that was great. The research just keeps coming out. But the thing I wanted to say about that is one of the things I talk about with my clients, which is sleep and food. Because those are things that we can control, every single day, and you can restart every day. And I think that's a very important option to have good control over if someone's really trying to make themselves into the best poker player they can be.
You're probably aware of this, but there is some stuff coming out now around mindful eating, around certain eating disorders and things like that. So this mindfulness is just going everywhere. And, now we're starting to get high quality empirical studies around it that are showing effectiveness, and in many cases as effective as medication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the studies that I find the most, let's say, if you're trying to convince someone that mindfulness is a good idea, are the ones that have shown actual physiological changes in the brain. You familiar with that?
Yes, I actually mentioned some of that in Positive Poker, which is, my book that came out a couple years ago.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to me, that just says it right there. That it says, one, not only is it effective, but it also shines a light on how it's a long process. It's a training process, learning a musical instrument.
Yeah, it's no different to training a muscle, is it?
Mm-hmm.
The more you do, the stronger the muscle becomes. Instead, you're training your brain. And the more you do, the stronger your mind becomes in dealing with these situations.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So in terms of your poker now, Tommy, do you still get to head to the table much? Do you follow any of the series, or is it home games, or what do you play?
I play in Vegas about 4 or 5 weeks per year. So what I do now, the only time I really enjoy playing poker is if I have nothing else to do for at least 3 or 4 days. So driving down to a local club and playing, I would just rather stay home and write. But when I go to Vegas, I'm there for 4 or 5 days to do nothing but play poker. And then I really enjoy it. Then I can completely focus on it. And I do go to the World Series for a couple of weeks every year. And so that's my poker play. I play about 4 times a year. I go down to Vegas and play for about 5 days.
And what is your main game?
Oh, for the last 6 or 7 years, the only game I've played is 5-10 no limit.
Oh, okay.
Live.
When you go to the series, are you just playing the side cash games, or are you actually playing some of the tournaments?
No, I just play nothing but 5-10 no limit. Here's a kind of a funny stat. I've been going to the World Series since 1987, and I've never played an event.
Wow. That's some mental strength there.
You want to know why?
So we met, a couple years ago, actually, during the World Series. And at the time you talked about you were starting another book. Do you want to talk about that and where you're at with that?
Sure. I'm working on a book called Painless Poker. I've been working on it for 4 or 5 years. It changed direction 3 or 4 years ago. It went from being a, instructional type book like yours and mine. And now it's turned into a fiction book, but it's still a poker book. So the setting is me teaching a workshop, a multi-day workshop with 7 poker players. So it's fictional. And the name of the setting is the Painless Poker Clinic. And so there's 7 fictional characters there that are all archetypal poker players. And we just go through all kinds of material. And like the meditation stuff was really fun because 2 of them are really geeky analytical guys. And they're coming at me really hard with all the standard questions and objections that, a young person would have about meditation. So it's turned out to be an excellent venue for me to flesh out all my material and my ideas.
That sounds really, really fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And where are we looking at in terms of a release date, do you think?
I would estimate about a year from now. So if somebody wants to keep up on me and my book, they can just join my mailing list at my website, tommyangelo.com.
Perfect. Now, we can't let him go without getting him to talk about the worst case of tilt he's ever seen, can we?
No, over all of those years, you must have some great stories. So, thinking over all of those years of poker, all of those hours at the table, what is the worst case of tilt that you've seen?
That would be an impossible question, except that there is one that stands out. And it was this guy, I'm not going to say his name. He's probably dead by now, but this is back in Columbus. So we're playing in these home games down these smoky, sweaty basements. And there was this one guy there named John, old guy, and he would get so upset routinely that, his veins would be popping out, and he's just like the most intensely tilted guy you'd ever met. So one day he was having one of his extreme tilt seizures. He went in the bathroom and he goes, I'm going to fucking go kill myself. And he goes in the bathroom and shoots off a gun. Okay. And then, and then nobody did anything. And then he came back out and he was more tilted than ever because nobody even came in to see if he had blown his head off. So that's my best tilt story.
I think we have a new winner, Trisha, of the most extreme.
Yeah, that takes the cake.
I remember it well. It was one of those emotional spikes that has been seared into my brain.
And how did you guys treat him when he got back to the table?
We'd been around this guy forever. It ended up being, we laughed about it for years.
Yeah.
But people were really mean to each other back then in these settings. So, any chance, if somebody would get really upset, that was just an opportunity to stick the needle in deeper, So I think that was one of the reasons I, for many years, have tried to not show when I was upset because I didn't want to give my opponents the satisfaction of seeing me hurting. Wow.
I mean, as I say, I think you are the new champion of tilt stories. Someone firing a gun in a home game. It's going to take some beating for that one. So again, if people want to find out about you, tommyangelo.com, are you on Twitter or anything like that as well?
Yes, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @TommyAngelo. And I do have a Facebook page where I, post stuff. And I'm writing a monthly column for PokerNews, so you can find some of my stuff there.
Excellent.
Awesome.
And you do have a book already out, Elements of Poker, that people can find as well. So if, you want to learn more about Tommy and his work, check out that book and join that mailing list. So Tommy, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to talk to you and to have someone else who's working in the same industry as us, trying to help these poker players play better. Yeah, you guys are doing great work. It's really wonderful. I hear so much good things about you. Oh, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, cheers, Tommy. Good luck at the tables and good luck with the new project. Okay, cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
And that was great to have Tommy on the show. So much information there regarding meditation.
I think my favorite part was where he talked about suffering being, a sense of dissatisfaction, because when he was explaining it as like, we want things to be different than they are, or we want things to stay the same, I was like, oh yeah, I really resonate with what he's saying. That makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of poker, is the fact that people want their aces to hold, and it causes issues when they don't. So, really think over that stuff. If you're out there, think about, why am I struggling in this spot? Is it that I'm trying to fight with reality? Obviously, we all know you can't win every poker session. So trying to win every session and being upset if you don't is going to be incredibly painful. If you can't accept that really all you're looking to do is win the hand, not necessarily the pot. So play your best in each hand. Fold when your opponent's range has you beaten. Try and get your opponent to go all in when your range has his beaten. And that's the game that we should be looking to play.
And the other thing that I thought was pretty interesting is his definition of tilt as being any non-A game, behavior or thoughts or whatever. But it's anything that's non-A game, he classifies as tilt.
And I agree with that completely. Any irrational behavior at the table that's impacting your game is tilt, I believe. I could completely agree with Tommy on that spot. Yeah, so Trisha, where can people find out about you and your products?
You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Trisha Cardner, or you could check out my website, drtrishacardner.com. And, as you know, I'm everywhere, making videos at Red Chip Poker. I write for PokerNews. So, yeah, you can find me all over the place.
You can struggle not to find you. And if you're interested in my products or services, visit pokermindcoach.com. Thanks for listening to the show, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, guys.